talking about a major central office review we went through about 5 years ago. So about 5 years ago, we really found we'd lost our way. Through a number of things that had occurred, we were becoming more centralized and top-down. We were finding things weren't working, kind of moved from my result, your process, to what I would call almost site-based anarchy in some ways, and it wasn't working. And so the superintendent at the time said to me, well, what do we need to do? Maybe what we need to do is reorganize and restructure and come up with something different. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure it's just about the organizational structure. So I had an opportunity in the fall of 2009 to go to a course put on around organizational design, basing their whole process not on the whole idea of organizational structures and hierarchies and boxes, but on the IDEO design process. So I came back to Edmonton and I said to Edgar, our superintendent, I think we should look at approaching something like this. He said, great, you've got it. So he said, well, what do you need? He said, I'm going to need your support, but really can you just let me run with it and be able to pick our team and look at a process and not to have any barriers? And he said, yes. We went with a very simple phrase. We need to be designed to. And we wanted to answer that question. And we wanted to involve a whole bunch of stakeholders from a point of view of saying, so in terms of central services, this is not about moving boxes on an org chart, but this is fundamental reset. We need to be designed to, and we want to involve people in that discussion. So we used the 4D model of design. We went through a define phase, went through a discover phase, design phase, and then the do phase. So when we started to look at it, the define phase was setting our boundaries, and it was taking a look at selecting a project team. And then it was basically when we went to the discover phase and the design phase. And I said to Edgar at the time, if this is going to work, I want to have a design team that I work with that is at the middle, that is not senior management, not managing directors or directors, but the middle level of the organization. And then in terms of engaging people in the discussion, I want to bring in every single one of our principals and every mid-level central leader to have discussions amongst themselves. And then I want to bring in a representative group of frontline staff, teachers, maintenance staff, custodial staff, support staff, our exempt staff, and a good cross-section of new people who are new to the district, people who've been here for 30 years, but really bring them in. It's going to cost some money, but I actually want to engage about 600 people in this discussion. And he said yes. And then I said the next part, which I thought, well, let's see how this works out for my career. So the executive team, the managing directors, the directors, I want them just to be table facilitators. And their job is keep the discussion going and to listen and to take notes. And so at the end, we ended up with a do phase where we had a report that we put together with about 17 recommendations. But one of the things that was really important for us is that we approached everything from the point of view of what we call the change resistance equation. First of all, we needed to unearth D, which is dissatisfaction. What's the level of dissatisfaction with the way we're currently doing things? And let's surface all of that. All the issues, all the challenges, all of the things that are really grinding people down. And really get a sense of what's the level of dissatisfaction with the current system. Because if there's a high level of dissatisfaction, then there's an impetus for change. But it can't just be dissatisfaction. It also has to be V. What's the vision for the future? What are we going to be designed to do to meet the needs of students and teachers in the classroom? And then finally, what are those F? First, concrete steps that can be taken. Because if you can combine a high level of dissatisfaction with a high commitment to a vision, and with concrete first steps that can be taken, then as the belief is you're going to have commitment and you can overcome resistance. So the define phase was our boundaries, and there were a few really key ones that came out of here. And so what we looked at is what are our givens, our guarantees, and what are some of the opportunities we're looking at. So one of the givens was, yep, we still believe in programs of choice. Absolutely, we are still committed to localized decision making. And that was important for our principals to hear. We had moved to a bit of a toxic environment where that wasn't the case. So there was an automatic given up front. We are committed to localized decision making. And then there were a number of other givens, and then some of the really guarantees were, we're going to help everybody through this process because it is going to look different. We're going to involve all the stakeholders. We're going to make our commitments. We're going to be transparent about it, and we're going to move forward. I got assigned to this project in December, and Edgar said, oh yeah, I want it done by the end of March. And so that was one of our commitments, was we had to be done by the end of March. So to review the current state, What we did was we pulled everybody together, all of our central leaders and principals, 300 of them on January 6th, and our cross-section of staff on January 21st. We started off first of all saying, so what is working in the system? When things are going really well, what does that look like? And let's make sure we preserve that. And then we started to identify what are some of the trends, some of the developments, some of the events that are going to affect us. And then we got into what everybody wanted to talk about, which let's identify what are the challenges and what are the opportunities. But we were very careful in our table selection. Not that we assigned specific people to tables, but we said very much we want a mixed-match group. So therefore, we don't want all the high school principals sitting together. So sit with your colleagues from junior high and elementary, and make sure that there are representative central leaders at every table. And what we did do is assign for the second day, in that we ensured that at every table there were teachers, and there were custodians, and there were support staff, and there were maintenance staff, and central staff, because we wanted to make sure we got a cross-section of opinions from all of the tables. The morning was based on that, and people were okay to give us that where we could get into the general stuff. But then in the afternoon, we know there were specific areas people wanted to tackle. And at that point in time, we said, go into homogenous groups. So therefore, you had principals that big issues for them were infrastructure. They were at the table with custodial and maintenance staff. Or the big issue was administration. Or the big issue was leadership development. Or the big issue was the support for instruction. And so we took them through those days. We had two outcomes we wanted. What was going to be our design criteria moving forward in terms of how are we going to redesign central services. And then the second part was taking a look at it from the point of view of what are some of the design concepts. And we made sure that in that second day when we got them back together again, we wanted to validate, did we hear what you said correctly? Did we get it right? First thing that we got from people through that appreciative inquiry was we've got tremendous amounts of talent. And what we've also found out was because of those mixed match groups, teachers were finding out that maintenance staff were actually interested in kids and wanted to help. And then they talked about what their frustrations were in trying to do good work. And then central staff got to hear from teachers what it felt like when all the initiatives from central hit the classroom. And they're just saying, but I want to focus on teaching and learning. So suddenly, central people were hearing what other central people had to say and what schools had to say. Schools were hearing what was happening in other schools and what was happening in terms of interacting with central. We were starting to see that there was actually quite a bit of overlap in that what people thought people wanted. I just want to do a really good job to support kids. And let's talk about what gets in the way. And that what was common was people were saying, I am here for the kids. We need to remove the barriers. I get why my barriers bug you. So let's talk about what we can do. We received really good, clear direction from people. Be transparent, communicate the why and the how. Third one was the critical one. Let this be a new beginning. Let's focus on moving forward and not rehashing what had happened in the past. And then make changes and align the resources accordingly. Believe in the new, but recognize what's working. We also did a world about where we brought out what everybody said was important to them. So when we pulled together the facilitators' notes from 80 different tables from 600 people, these were the words that resonated and came up more often than any other words. And what it came down to is, number one, this is about relationships and collaboration, and number two, this is about communication. And so that also informed where we went.